Everybody loves to argue about what car built America. Some folks say it's the Mustang. Sure, it was cute and sporty. Others swear by the Chevy Corvette. Fast, shiny, but most of them lived in a garage under a cover. Let's be honest here. Neither of those things built Jack. You know what actually built America? A truck. Not a car you polish on Sundays, but a truck that you spent Monday to Saturday beating to hell, and then you drove it to church on Sunday with the family hauling lumber, dragging trailers, feeding families, and still firing it up the next morning. And that truck is the Ford F Series. This is the story of how one pickup went from dusty farm roads to being the best-selling vehicle in America for over 40 years straight. And along the way, it pissed off Chevy and it made Dodge sweat and became an instant generational icon. So how did the Ford F-Series truck come about? After World War II, America was ready to get back to work. Soldiers came home, factories that once built tanks were switching to tractors, and the country was hungry to build houses, farms, and businesses. The problem was simple. Cars were for getting around, but folks needed something tougher. They needed a machine that could pull, haul, and take a beating without falling apart. That's when Ford stepped in with the very first F-Series in 1948. It's called the bonus built line. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't meant to sit in a driveway and look pretty, but these trucks were bare bones, flat fenders, steel everything, and simple engines that you could fix with a wrench and a Saturday afternoon. They came in sizes from the light-duty F1 all the way up to the heavy-duty F8s, covering everything from the farmer in Iowa to the guy hauling freight across the country. These trucks were tools, not toys. If you were building fences, carrying lumber, or dragging a trailer full of livestock, this was the rig that got it done. And that's what set the tone for the next 75 years. The F-Series wasn't born to be cool, it was born to work. And in post-war America, that's exactly what people wanted. And in the late 1940s, the pickup was just a farmhand on four wheels. But by the 1950s, America was booming. Suburbs were exploding, highways were spreading, and families were buying cars like they never have before. And here's one thing, folks started realizing that a truck didn't have to just be a work rig. It could be a family's everyday driver. Ford jumped on it quick, and in 1953, they launched the second generation F-Series, and this was the first time they ditched that F1 badge and gave us the names that we still recognize today, like the Ford F-100, F-250, and F-350. That second gen, built from 1953 to 56, is still one of the most iconic Ford trucks ever made. In fact, it's my personal favorite. That black F-100 from the Expendables, yeah, that truck has been on my dream list forever. By the late 50s, the game had changed. You could order an F-100 with a two-tone paint job, chrome trim, a heater, a radio, and these were luxuries that no farmer ever thought he needed until he had them and it worked. In 1959 alone, Ford sold over 330,000 trucks. That was huge for the time. And then in the 1960s, they pushed it even further. Ford added the cleaner style side bed, bigger windshields, roomier cabs, and more comfortable interiors. Suddenly, the kids were piled into the front bench, the groceries were tossed in the back, and these trucks were rolling through the grocery store parking lots, church on Sundays, and Little League games. This was really the crossover moment. The F-Series stopped being just a work truck and a tool and became the all-in-one American family vehicle. Work during the week, respectable enough for Saturday night, and that shift is what gave the F-Series the momentum to dominate the decades that followed. And then came the 1970s, and unfortunately, trucks were in trouble. Gas prices shot through the roof, and thanks to the oil embargo, people were waiting in line for hours just to fill up, and every gallon of gas counted. At the same time, Uncle Sam started cracking down with new emissions and safety regulations, and suddenly these light-duty trucks that everybody loved were on the chopping block. The old F-100 was one of these victims. It just couldn't keep up with the new rules, and a lot of folks thought this might be the beginning of the end for pickups, but Ford had other plans. In 1975, they pulled a slick move, and they created a brand new slot right in the middle called the Ford F-150. Here's why it mattered. The F-150 was beefier than the F-100, so it could dodge some of those new regulations, but it wasn't as heavy and as expensive as the F-250. It was the sweet spot, strong enough to haul and tow, efficient enough to survive the gas crunch, and reliable enough to keep doing work. Meanwhile, Chevy and Dodge were scrambling. Their trucks either guzzled gas like it was free or got watered down trying to pass emissions. Ford found the loophole, and the F-150 walked right through it. The gamble paid off, and by the end of the decade, the F 150 wasn't just another option, it became the flagship of the lineup. The F 100 quietly faded away, and the F 150 stepped in as America's truck. This was the turning point. If Ford hadn't made that move, trucks might have gone away with the muscle car, strangled by gas prices and regulations. Instead, the F 150 kept the pickup alive and set the stage for it to take over the whole damn market. And by the early 1980s, the gamble had paid off. The F 150 wasn't just holding steady, it was climbing. And in 1981, Ford's F Series officially became the best selling vehicle in America. Not just the best truck, the best selling vehicle, period. And here's the kicker, it's held that title ever since. And in the 80s, it brought in the upgrades that they made the F 150 tougher and smarter. Fuel injection replaced carburetors, making the trucks easier to start, smoother to run, and better on fuel. Frames got stronger and suspensions handled more abuse. And Ford kept pumping out trims like the XL, the XLT, and the Lariat, so you could get everything from a bare-bones work truck to something that felt luxurious. Meanwhile, Chevy and Dodge were still trying to keep up. Chevy square bodies had their loyal fans, but reliability issues started to creep in. Dodge? They were hanging on with old designs until the 90s, and when they finally caught attention with that big rig Ram, but by then Ford had already been king of the hill for over a decade. By the 90s, the F 150 wasn't just a cool tool anymore, it was a symbol. You pulled into job sites in an F 150, people knew you meant business. You backed a boat down a ramp in an F 150, nobody questioned if it could handle it. This wasn't just America's truck, it was the truck that every competitor measured themselves against and usually came up short. By the 1990s, the F 150 had already proven itself as the workhorse of America, but Ford saw an even bigger opportunity. People didn't want just a tough truck anymore. They wanted comfort, style, and a little bit of bragging rights. And that's exactly what Ford gave them. The ninth generation of trucks built from 1992 to 1996 are now known as the OBS trucks, or old body style. Back then, no one called them that. They were just F-150s on the lot. But fast forward to today, and these OBS trucks have become legendary. The clean, boxy design, simple mechanics, and bulletproof reputation make them one of the most desirable classic pickups that you can buy in 2025. Find a low mileage one in good shape, that's like striking oil. Every collector, every enthusiast wants their hands on it. But even beyond the OBS craze, Ford kept pushing forward. Crew cabs exploded in popularity, giving trucks enough room for the whole family. Heated seats and wood trim and sunroofs. You could spec an F-150 that looked like a luxury car and then a job site beater. Country singers were name dropping them in songs, and Ford trucks were everywhere in music videos, commercials, and TV shows. Owning an F-150 wasn't just practical anymore, it was a statement. But let's not forget, the F-150 wasn't just playing dress up. These trucks could still haul, still tow, and still take a beating. The difference was you could now pull into a steakhouse on a Friday night with the family, step out of your leather-trimmed F-150, and nobody looked at it like a work truck. They looked at it as success on four wheels. Meanwhile, Chevy and Dodge were still trying to catch the same wave. Chevy pushed the Silverado, Dodge rolled out the big rig Ram in 94, and yeah, it turns heads, but Ford had the momentum, the sales, and the cultural footprint. By the early 2000s, the F-150 wasn't just the best-selling truck, it was the vehicle that defined America's roads from job sites to cul-de-sacs. This was the era where the pickup fully crossed over. It stopped being a tool and became a lifestyle. And once Ford locked that down, they weren't giving it back. By the early 2000s, Ford had already proven that the F-150 could do it all. It was a workhorse, a family hauler, and a status symbol. But then they asked a different question. What if we made trucks that were just plain fun? And that's when the era of specialty F-150s really kicked into gear. First up was the SVT Lightning. This dropped in the 90s, but the second-gen Lightning in the early 2000s really made headlines. This was a sport truck with a supercharged 5.4-liter V8 that cranked out 380 horsepower and could outrun a muscle car at the time. Imagine smoking Camaros in a pickup truck with a bed full of lawn chairs. That's the Lightning. To this day, clean examples are highly sought after. And then there was the Harley-Davidson Edition. This wasn't just about speed, it was about style. That black paint, chrome trim, leather seats, and Harley stitching just had attitude for days. It was less job site and more pull up to the bar, drop jaws in the parking lot. Ford also doubled down on the luxury with the King Ranch and the Platinum. These trucks weren't just vehicles, they were rolling cabins wrapped in leather, wood, and more tech than most of the cars at the time. If the Lightning was for the drag strip, the Harley truck was for style, King Ranch was for the guy who wanted his pickup to feel like a high end SUV without losing the utility. And then, of course, came the Ford Raptor. Launched in 2010, the Raptor was Ford's middle finger to the idea that trucks had to stay on pavement. This was a desert racer that you could buy straight from the dealership, wide body, long travel suspension, had a big V8 back then, and then later switched to the EcoBoost twin turbo V6. It was built to fly over sand dunes and still haul groceries afterwards. No other brand had anything like it. Chevy and Dodge didn't have an answer. The Raptor carved its own category and became an instant legend. These specialty trucks showed the world that the F-150 wasn't just a reliable workhorse. It could be fast, flashy, luxurious, and just downright insane off-road. They took the F-150 nameplate and turned it into a full-on family of personalities. Each one, the Lightning, the Harley, the King Ranch, the Raptor, added fuel to the fire of Ford's dominance. By the 2010s, Ford had been on top for decades, but they weren't about to get lazy. Instead, they doubled down. The boldest play came in 2015 when Ford made the radical decision to build the F-150 bodies out of aluminum instead of steel. Critics called it insane, rivals called it weak. Chevy even made commercials about tossing cinder blocks in their Silverado beds while showing Fords getting dented. And the internet clowned on it hard, calling the F-150 a beer can on wheels. But here's the kicker. It worked. The aluminum body made these trucks hundreds of pounds lighter, and which meant they had better fuel economy, more towing capacity, and higher payloads. Contractors discovered they could haul more while filling up less. Ford proved once again that they weren't just building trucks, they were rewriting the playbook. And it didn't stop there. Ford was also busy under the hood. In 2011, they dropped a 3.5-liter EcoBoost V6 into the F-150. This was a twin-turbo V6 in a full-size truck. Purists scoffed, a V6 in a truck, but the numbers don't lie. The EcoBoost made big torque, towed like a champ, and quickly became one of Ford's most popular engines. Pair that with a 10-speed automatic transmission Ford co-developed with GM, and you had a drivetrain that could tow smoother, shift smarter, and squeeze more out of every gallon. By the late 2010s, Ford wasn't just chasing numbers. They were layering in on tech. Big touchscreens, trailer backup assist, blind spot monitoring, adaptive cruise control, features that started in luxury sedans were now in America's workhorse. Then they went even further with the Pro Power onboard, turning every truck into a rolling generator that could run tools at a job site or power your whole campsite. The F-150 wasn't just evolving, it was transforming into something that nobody else had. A truck that could work harder, drive smarter, and still carry the crown as America's best-selling vehicle. By the time the 2020s rolled in, Ford had made it clear this wasn't just the truck that people bought. This was the truck every competitor had to measure themselves towards. Today, the F-150 is still evolving. The all-electric F-150 Lightning is here, proving that even in the EV era, Ford isn't afraid to push the pickup into uncharted territory. Some folks love it, some folks hate it, but that's just the same story that we've heard every time Ford took a gamble. And history shows us they usually get it right. The real legacy of the F-Series isn't just about aluminum bodies, EcoBoost engines, or an all-electric. It's about the fact that for 75 years, this truck has been the backbone of America. It built farms, carried families, hauled steel, and survived everything the country threw at it. Wars, recessions, gas crisis, and now the electric future. Over 40 million F-Series trucks have hit the road since 1948. Think about that for a second. 40 million stories, 40 million sets of scratches and dents, 40 million reminders that this wasn't just transportation. It was the truck that built America. And the legacy lives on, whether it's an old farm F-100, an OBS 90 Survivor, a screaming Raptor, or the silent push of an EV Lightning. When you see that F on the grill, you know exactly what it stands for. And if you've made it this far, I sincerely appreciate it. I'm still working on these videos. I'm trying a new style for this one. If you guys can give me your feedback in the comments, do you like this? Do you hate it? Do you want to see something in the next one? I'll try and make it happen. Please drop a like and subscribe if this is something you like, and continue to support the channel. Thanks again.